Hello student, welcome to today's wonderful session. As we have done our courses and many of student demands for the revision of the poetry section once again. So today I am taking up a poem Tiger in the Zoo. Before moving ahead towards the poem, I would like to give you a little bit introduction about the poet. This poem has been written by the George Leslie Norrells. He is a Welsh poet and he is not only a poet but he is also a short story writer and won so many prizes for his literary works. He is considered as a post-war poet. When we see the title of this poem, The Tiger in the Zoo, the poet wants to give some important message. The title is very powerful and it has a strong message for all of us. The tiger in the zoo, the tiger should not be in the zoo. Tiger should be in his natural habitat. So through this poem, the poet wants to depict the contrast of the tiger in the zoo or tiger in its natural habitat jungle. So you see many of you students, I would like to ask many of you that you have many times visited the zoo, but you ever realize or you ever think about the feeling of those animals who are in the zoo? They feel happy, enjoying, or they feel the captivated or the sad. So through this poem, the poet wants to give us, the poet wants to convey an important message to all the readers that the wild animal should not be kept in the zoo for the fun and the enjoyment of the human being, but they should be live in their natural habitat. So there is a strong contrast and the comparison between the two types of the tiger. One is living in the zoo and another is living in the forest and he is enjoying his natural life. It is a the contrast between the freedom and the captivity. He shows that how love for the freedom is the natural instinct of the every human being or every living being. From an insect tiniest like the ant, and from to the huge animal like the elephant, everybody wants to live their life freely. They don't want to be live the captured life. Here he shows the life of the tiger. Tiger is quietly powerless, quietly helpless because he is in the zoo. He is captured, so he is no longer being happy there. After taking the introduction, a little bit about the poet, now we proceed towards a line-to-line explanation of the poem with the difficult word meaning, and in the end of the poem we will discuss some literary device of this poetry. He stalks in his vivid stripes, the few steps of his gaze on pads of the velvet quiet in his quiet race. Here the stalks means the follows, the vivid is a bright colored and pad is the paws of the tiger. So here the poet describes that the tiger who is in the prison, who is confined in the zoo, moves around in the cage under his bright colored skin. The further poet says that tiger can take only a few steps in the zoo because the zoo is a very narrow place. So it is not fit for the wild animal. It does not suit to the personality like the tiger. So only he can walk, he can move only the few steps because the cage is very small. It is a very narrow place and it is not easy to move in it for tiger. One cannot hear his footsteps because he has very soft feet. His feet like the velvet. Here the poet uses the simile and he uses the word like or as. So his poet compares his paws with a soft velvet, so nobody could hear the sound of his footsteps. There is no sound of the tiger's footstep. The tiger tries to control. He is in the full race, but because he is helpless, he is powerless, so he has to suppress, he has to control his anger while he is walking in the cage, in that limited area of the cage. He is quite angry because he is in prison. He is not free. So, in this first stanza, the poet describes his personality about and here the poet uses the word he for the tiger. So that's why the tiger has been personified here. Now the second stanza. He should be lurking in the shadow, sliding through long grass near the hole where the plump deer pass. In this stanza, the thought of the poet back to the jungle. Now here he presents the contrast. For in the first stanza, he presents the tiger in the zoo, and in the second stanza, he imagined that what would be happen when the tiger lives in the jungle in his natural habitat. So he should be lurking in the shadow. Lurking means to be hidden, as to wait for the prey. And in this stanza, the poet wants to say that if the tiger, if the wild animal, he would have been living in his natural habitat, what would happen with him? He would have hid himself behind the long grass and near some water bodies, near some water pools, so that he could easily catch a deer. Because he is a wild animal, so the every animal in this world, from the insect and to a huge animal, they would like to live their life freedom. So if we take an example of a bird, one bird lives in the open sky, he would like to fly in the open sky, and another bird lives in a golden cage. It cannot become happy. When the bird lives in a golden cage, it cannot become happy. It loves to fly in the open sky. In the same way, if the man live in the prison and gets everything which he needed, which he required, but he cannot feel happy because because of his imprisonment. Like the same way, here the poet describes that the wild animal should not be kept in the zoo. So in this stanza, the poet says that he would have been waiting for some plump prey for to fill his stomach, to satisfy his hunger, and in order to have it as its food. Basically, the poet wants to say that actually life of the tiger is to live in the jungle, where he could catch his prey, where he could hide himself in the long grass, where he could live his life happily, enjoyingly. So the proper place of living a tiger is its natural habitat, forest and jungle. We can say the jungle also, but not the zoo. Zoo is not the proper appropriate place for the zoo. In the third stanza, he should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. Snarling here means the warning sound made by the animals, like the growling sounds. In this stanza, the poet again back to the tiger of the zoo who is imprisoned. The poet says the tiger would have been free. He compared both the caged tiger or the free tiger in the forest. So the poet is again saying that if the tiger would be free, he would have snarled around the houses located at. If he could not get his prey in the jungle, then he trouble for the villagers who live nearby the outskirts of the forest. So the forest tiger who would have snarled around the houses located at the outskirts of the forest, and he would terrorize the people. He would afraid the people with his sharp tooth and the claws with his paws. He would create fear among the people living in the village. So that the poet wants to say that tiger is known for his strength, for his power, but because he is captured in the zoo, so he became powerless and helpless. So in this line the poet compares the both type of tiger, and he appeals to the people that the wild animal should not be captured for their fun and for the enjoyment of the human being. For the purpose of the business, the wild animal should not be kept. Now the fourth stanza. But he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind the bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. The concrete is the building made of bricks and the cement and the sand and the water. So now in these lines the poet's thought again come back to the tiger in the zoo. So now the poet comes to the reality of the tiger, that inside the cage he says that the tiger is imprisoned. He is confined in a strong cell which is made of the strong building material. And now the poet further says that as a tiger is behind the bars, so he is, whether he is furious, he is dangerous animal, is also behind the bars. Now he become powerless and helplessness. He just stalks in the case and he never tries to terrorize the visitor because his power is restricted by the case. He wants to show his power, but because of the restriction, now he became powerless. Therefore, he never tries to terrorize the visitors as he cannot attack them, and he did not show any attention towards the people, towards the visitors who came to the visit to have fun and enjoy of those wild animals. And in the last stanza, now he hears the last voice at the night, the patrolling cars and the stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. Now he says that the tiger in the zoo, the poet says that in the night time, what the feeling of the tiger, what he realizes, what he feels, the tiger, the poet says that tiger hears only the sound of the patrolling cars, because the patrolling cars moves around to take care of those wild animals at the night time. So he only hears the sound of that patrolling cars, and patrolling cars are the vehicles of the police which are used to guard the wild animals at the night time. So in that night the tiger hears the sound of only those cars, and then he stares at the shining stars in the starry night with his shining eyes. There is a brightness in his eyes. Here the brightness means he has still hope for getting free from that bars. The poet wants to say the tiger is sad in the zoo as he is imprisoned in the cage, so he cannot do anything. He cannot show his power. Therefore he stares at the stars in the night and he tries to divert his thoughts towards them. So in this poem, the poet beautifully describes the mental condition of the tiger. Now the poem ends. Let's have some, I hope you understand the poem well, and now let's have some glance on the important literary devices of this poem. So now the literary devices of the poem. Now I am discussing some important literary devices. First is the rhyme scheme of the poem. If we discuss about the rhyme scheme of the poem is A, B, C, B. Like we can say case or the race. The second literary device we find in the poem is the personification. So, because the tiger is personified in the whole poem, because the poet refers him as a he. So, there is a personification also in the poem. The third literary devices, if we see in the poem, is a metaphor. In the line, the tiger's paws. It is a direct metaphor is a direct comparison. So, here the tiger's paws are compared with the velvet pads. So this is the metaphor. And then the next two literary devices is enjambment. What is enjambment? The sentence is continued to the next line without any punctuation marks or full stop is known as a enjambment. So here the first line runs into the second and then third, and then in the fourth line it completes. So this is the enjambment, and this rhyme scheme runs in the whole poem. Now the next literary device is imagery. The poet tries to create image about the tiger. In the very first stanza, if we see, the poet beautifully describes the image of the tiger like he stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his case. It creates a visual imagery in front of our eyes. Now, if we discuss the next literary device, that is oxymoron, the use of adjectives opposite in meaning. So here he is in the quiet race. So quiet and the race both are the different adjectives, opposite adjectives. So here he uses the oxymoron in this poem. And the next, if we see the next literary device, these are some important literary device, and there are some more literary device also ahead in the poem. So there is a alliteration, he uses the alliteration, he uses the assonance, and these all are there. Is another literary device the poet uses is onomatopoeia. The onomatopoeia is the sound. So here he uses the snarling. Snarling he uses also as a literary device, the sound of the tiger. So the poem ends, and I will discuss difficult word meaning and some literary device. I hope you understand it well. Goodbye and take care.